You always want to have awareness. Treat every gun like it's loaded. Don't point your gun at anything you don't intend to kill or destroy. Never put your finger on the trigger until you're ready to fire and you have a target. Always know your target, what's behind it, and everywhere around it. Those elements will keep you safe, keep you training safely, and keep everybody else around you safe as well.
The information in this podcast is for entertainment and educational purposes. Our informational content cannot address all dangerous situations and cannot guarantee your survival or prevent injuries when the unexpected happens. The decision to carry a firearm, either for recreation or for personal defense, carries the risk and potential for injury and or death. Therefore, it is advised that you seek out and acquire proper training before using a firearm or any firearm-related product.
What are some self-defense techniques?
What would happen if there was a global internet outage?
What should I do if I hear shots ringing out?
Or what I should do if there's a major terrorist attack?
What should I have? What's the best?
What should I do?
What does that look like?
What would you recommend?
Is there anything I could do?
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Dangerous Questions, an Ironclad original. We've been talking about home invasions, firearms. In this episode, we're going to be focusing on firearm techniques and just some of the principles that are applied with firearms in general. You know, we've had people follow up with questions on specific things to do, and I think we'll gain a little bit of clarity there. Before I really dig into the meat of everything, I just want to give a quick shout out to Jaden for sending me this rosary. Dude, thank you so much. This thing is awesome. I'm carrying it with extreme joy. I know you put a lot of work and effort into this thing, so really, really cool. One of our fans of the show sent that in, and it will definitely be with me. So thanks for allowing me to armor up a little bit. I want to get into the firearm stuff because there's a lot of people out there that have made a purchase, that have stepped into this world of trying to be a good citizen, of carrying a firearm, having a firearm at home. But please, as you watch this, continue to understand that it's not going to do you much good if you're not utilizing it and you're not applying it to your life. Get the training, get the reps, do it, take action. You know, if it really means something to you, you do have to give up something else. You know, anytime that we want to improve or anytime that we want to grow in our lives, we really do have to take a hard look at everything we've got going on and say, something's got to give. And that means that now that you're taking on this responsibility and it's important to you, something else that's less important needs to go. And sometimes that's giving up stuff that we're used to or is irrelevant or even useless. So make the point to try to identify what that is in your life. If you're gonna step your game up and be better at what you're doing on a daily basis, you might have to give something up. So with having said that, let's get into the firearms techniques. Let's get to the first question. Okay, what's the one drill that is most effective to improve your rifle performance for a beginner, intermediate level shooter? Okay, so we're thinking about a rifle platform, right? What's the one drill that I could utilize? And anytime that I think of being most effective at what we're doing, think about me carrying on a daily basis. Well, 90% of the scenarios that I could see myself in, the most effective thing that I could do is get the gun out online, presented, and take that first shot. That's gonna be the most important thing that I can possibly do. If I'm carrying, it's for a reason. It's probably to mitigate a threat, and I need to draw my gun out, get that gun up, and pull the trigger. So it's very similar to a carbine or a rifle platform, is if you're expecting that to be what you use for home defense, it's that up and in your shoulder and pull the trigger, because there's a lot going on there. I've seen a lot of people that are beginner and intermediate that don't even have, I shouldn't really say intermediate, but let's say beginner, that don't even have the ability to manipulate the safety, get the gun up, know the condition of their gun, and take an effective shot. That's the meat of it. That first shot, when you either still have the element of surprise or not, is gonna be to attack the first thing that you thought was important to go after, to mitigate or reduce the risk of life to your family and yourself. So to reduce that threat, get the gun up online and pull the trigger. Now, you can do that at point blank range, or you can go out to 200 yards. But you've got to get down to the fact where we do a lot of drills from high ready. You know, there's controversy out there. We could talk about that all day long. A lot of what I do is from the high ready because I am in that combative position. So if I'm going around a corner or whatever the case may be, I want to be able to get that gun up and pull the trigger. Manipulate the safety, even just the basic thing of me saying, know the condition of your gun, that's a beginner thing. How many people have come up to the line, not too often in my courses because there's a severe penalty for having a dead man's gun, but how many people don't know the condition of their gun? The second I walk into a gunfight or on the X or protecting my family, I know confidently 100% that gun is the way that I want it to be, and then I step into the fight. So that's part of that beginner knowledge, and that's part of getting used to getting that gun up online in your shoulder and getting that round exactly where you want it to be, as efficient as possible. Same thing with the pistol, same thing with the rifle. So I would say that's the most effective thing that you can do. Next question.
Best way to practice when you can't get to the range?
Best way, pretty straightforward. Best way to practice when you can't get to the range. The easiest thing for me to say is dry fire, right? But then we go into like, well, what does that mean when you dry fire? I can honestly say that some of the best guys that I've known, the best professionals and proficient firearms practitioners are the guys that set up things in their garage, set up things in their home, and they're using their whole entire environment to their advantage. Multiple targets. I mean, they're doing drills where they're having to transition from side to side. They're doing manipulation techniques. I'm gonna typically go and find dummy rounds and try to say, okay, within the context that I have right here, within this context of having this firearm that's clear and safe, what can I do to manipulate this thing? If I put a dummy round in here, that's gonna help me work on my reload and then get my gun up online, right? It's also gonna work for a dry fire drill for a dead man's gun. Say for instance that I have a round in here, a dummy round, and I have it in the chamber. Well, when I go to pull that trigger, I'm gonna get a click. Well, what do we do with a dead man's gun or a light strike is that we have to tap the magazine to make sure it's seated, rack the slide to get the bad round out of there, and then represent the gun. Now, I will tell you, there's a lot of bad habits that you can implement if you don't do these things right. But the basis of this is the most effective thing you could be doing is find ways that you can effectively dry fire with the platforms that you have. You know, the nuances of teaching you how to do that with dummy rounds, with no dummy rounds, how to present the gun. This kind of follows off of what I just said, is that if the most effective thing is you drawing and getting the gun online and taking that shot, well then that's the most effective thing you can do. Draw in the garage, find a place on the wall, press that thing out, make sure you're aligning the sights consistently every time, taking the slack out, you know, and then work through the repetition. You know, are you doing your scans? Are you working your finger manipulation? I can't tell you how many people show up to the range and they have a hard time with finger manipulation. You know, they'll be hanging out. I'm breaking this rule, by the way, for the sake of this video, but they're over here, they have their finger in the trigger, and then their gun comes back with their finger still in the trigger guard, and they go to look around. That is just absolutely not. You do not put your finger on the trigger unless you have intent and purpose and reason to have that gun online and a target to shoot at. You're breaking that rule for no reason. You don't have a purpose to it. So just something as simple as doing this in your garage, finger on the sights, off the sights, finger off, on the sights, on the trigger, off the sights, off the trigger, on the sights, on the trigger, off the trigger, off the sights. You get the idea. It's that I'm doing that. You could do this 1,000 times and still not have enough repetition. Boom, on the sights, front sight focus, back, finger off the trigger. Find the areas that you're weak in and then do that in your garage. Obviously, I can't help but to say this, never take the firearm safety rules for granted. Go to my website at crusheverything.com, sign up for the free firearm safety rules, and I break these things down in depth. Before you go dry fire, before you dry fire with your family, go brush up on these things. Awareness, right? You always want to have awareness. Treat every gun like it's loaded. Don't point your gun at anything you don't intend to kill or destroy. Never put your finger on the trigger until you're ready to fire and you have a target. Always know your target, what's behind it, and everywhere around it. Those elements will keep you safe, keep you training safely, and keep everybody else around you safe as well. Don't blow them off, guys, because they're important. So hopefully it adds a little bit of clarity to what you're doing at home and when you don't have ammo. Again, everybody should be dry firing. Everybody should have a level of proficiency. You don't have to go to the range to do it. That's just an excuse to not actually get it in right where you got it. Okay. All right, guys, this segment of Dangerous Questions is also brought to you by Mountain Tough. Mountain Tough Plus is the fitness app that's trusted by the dedicated. Who's the dedicated? You guys watching this show. We care about our ability to become assets and to be able to handle these situations, these scenarios. We're asking these questions for a reason. This is a fitness app that gives you no excuses and sets a level of fitness mindset that you guys can take with you everywhere. Mountain Tough is an all-access subscription platform. It gives you access to everything that they have available. World-class home fitness programs, mental training, self-improvement, prehab, rehab, everything that you guys need to set a solid foundation of fitness for your life. Again, you know fitness is really important to me, and I highly recommend this fitness app. And here on Dangerous Questions, we talk about it all the time. You've got to be prepared. Mountain Tough is giving an exclusive discount for all Dangerous Question listeners. Use the code DANGEROUS at mountaintough.com on the monthly subscription. You'll get your first month free, and that's on top of the 14-day free trial, giving you guys 6 weeks to test this out. 6 weeks of free trading at mountaintough.com. Go check it out. Next question. Can you educate us on CCW, EDC, please, especially scan, search, and assessing a real-world scenario? What about cover and concealment considerations and suggestions for during and post-response identification as the good guy and not being mistaken for the bad guy? Okay, lot to cover here, so leave this up so I can look at this. So they're basically saying, can you educate us on concealed carry and everyday carry? It's a lifestyle. It really has become that. It's become a loose term. When I see those, I see a sense of duty. I've discussed that before. So if you're talking about everyday carry, it's this responsibility of increasing in what you're doing. Now, when he's talking about scan, search, and assess in a real world scenario, it's kind of like I was just talking about being in the garage getting your dry fire in. If I'm here and I'm thinking about doing my post-fight assessment, if I just had to take shots in a real world environment, I might have just took shots, but I'm scanning. What's my next threat? What's going on around me? Do I have buddies? Do I have family members? Where do I need to move next? All of those elements are part of what you need to be building into your motor memory with that repetition. Those are the types of things that matter. That's the stuff that's going to catch you off guard. It's not as simple as just going to the range, pulling your gun out. One thing I wanted to talk about was you've got to break this static mindset. Okay, a lot of people get stuck in this. Even in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, what do you typically do? You walk into the mat room, you get on your knees, you give each other a high five, and you go. Well, you just missed a critical element of how that fight started. The stand-up clash, the grab, the stand-up grappling, the environment. There's some violent things that occur, boom, before all of a sudden you're down on the ground and rolling. Now, a pro knows that. A beginner, not so much. Don't get caught off guard implementing or using bad habits in your training that you're not aware of, because then you're breaking a rule and you don't know why. So when you guys are doing these things and you're in the garage and you're dry firing, add these things that matter. In the sense of scan, search, and assess, that's exactly what it says, guys. You're literally treating everything as if it's real in a training environment. So as you guys are preparing to be somebody that has an everyday carry lifestyle and you think you're going to be the person to mitigate a threat, then you should be implementing that too, because let's face it, in the real world, you need to be doing that constantly. As far as cover and concealment goes, the differences between the two matter. You have to understand how to utilize your environment. It essentially is my principle of environmental manipulation, but knowing what to do. Cover very, very, very pointedly should be able to stop bullets. It should be thick enough, stout enough to be able to slow bullets down. That's really what cover is. A big concrete stanchion, right? An engine block on a huge vehicle. These things that are in our environment that we can clearly say that would definitely slow a bullet down. What is not concealment and what is not cover? A giant glass window. That is neither concealment and that is neither cover. So let's talk about the contrast. Everything else on the opposite side of that is going to continue to help you in the event that you're in a real world fight. So concealment, again, concealment doesn't do much good if you've already been spotted, right? In very specific scenarios, maybe at night you were able to pop behind something, hide your presence, and then move a little bit, then somebody doesn't know where you're at. It's going to make it more difficult for you to be the target. But just understand the contrast of, if I own the element of surprise, I'm concealed, I'm in a good spot. They're not necessarily going to start picking a spot and just poking holes at it. Cover is something where I might have identified the threat. It might be somebody that's already shooting, and I want to get behind cover. Am I at a public environment that provides a level of cover? Cover can be multiple things too. Say I'm at a gas station. I have another vehicle, I have the gas pump, and then I have my engine block. Well, I just created layers of cover that the bullet has to go through in order to get to me or my family. Again, context. If I'm with my family, I'm going to be trying to get them behind as much cover as possible to slow those bullets down and mitigate that risk to their life. So again, that's the contrast between cover and concealment. All of these on here are really like 4-hour classes, but I'm trying to give them to you as best as I can in the short amount of time that we always have on these episodes. Okay, so this is just during and post response identification. Okay, this is the last part of the question, which is essentially, this is something that I think a lot of times there's a lot of misconceptions about this out there. So that you would be mistaken for the bad guy. I often put us in a environment where, say you're at a movie theater. Say there's 100 people there and 30 people are carrying. You've got 30 people that have no idea that each other's carrying, and a guy kicks the door in right below the screen and he starts plugging rounds at everybody. Okay, so I'm in an environment where 30 people draw at the same time. I want you to just feel that for a second. Close your eyes and visualize that environment. Is everybody all of a sudden gonna see the bad guy shooting first and then think everybody else is a threat? Or is everybody else gonna draw and orient on the same threat? I'm telling you right now with all my heart, you will feel that sense of things in the moment that the fight breaks out. Could things get confusing? Sure. My buddy Philip down in West Orlando Firearms Training, he does a great job of mixing things up to make sure that it is unclear. And that's what professionals like me want. We want to be in scenarios like, oh, this is kind of gray. Who's who in this? But typically, more than often, you're going to be able to tell who the good guy is and who the bad guy is. Good training and repetition is going to help you identify the bad guy pretty quickly. But if you study film, just like any good sports organization, the New England Patriots, what do? They go back and they identify what do they do wrong, what do they do right in the game. Well, go look at video of people that are breaking out in fights where the bad guy pulled out a gun. Most of the time you're going to be able to identify, oh, pretty much everybody knew who the bad guy was. Even in the scenario that we watched on the last episode of the robbery, the guy came in there, started taking everybody's watches and phones. You remember that one? Everybody sitting down was like, that's clearly the bad guy. Even if I had to draw right now, they're going to know that I'm on the good guy team. So I want you to visualize those. And again, not everything is that clear cut, but I'm going to tell you to just increase your confidence a little bit, that when you need to work it out, you can. The last thing I'll say about that is clear communication. If there's any confusion at all, just say who you are. Like, hey, I'm just trying to help out. Like, he's the bad guy. Sometimes you got to use clear, plain English to get the point across. Don't be afraid to do that. Sometimes visualizing like, oh shoot, I might have to get out of the car and go help this scenario. What am I going to say? Hey, I'm a good citizen trying to help out. I saw you guys needed help. I'm here. Something simple that you blurt out. And again, sometimes you got to use your instinct. Not every verbiage is going to be the same for each scenario. So when you're there and you feel like you're called to action, make sure that you're thinking about those things that add context to the scenario. And when in doubt, just make the next move right. Do the next thing the best you possibly can and then figure it out from there. So hopefully that adds a little bit of clarity to your question. It's a great question. And ultimately, if we think about things being connected to reality, that's what I want. I want to train for reality, not for some made up environment, not for the static range. It's a dynamic, realistic environment that I'm gonna be in. And all of these things are telling me that you are thinking about reality and not some fairy tale environment. You want to do the right thing. You know, what's my job as a concealed carry holder? What's my job to think of scanning and searching for the next threat? What's my job of thinking, hey, I am the good guy. I don't want to be able to get mixed up in this, and I want to be able to assess what's going on. So good job asking these questions, and I hope I added a little bit of my experience and background and training to why I do what I do in these environments. Get reps in, guys. That's what's most important. This episode is brought to you by Aimpoint, a name that I'm very familiar with, especially coming up in the teams, running a lot of their gear on our guns that are smaller packages and set up differently. You guys have been asking me a lot about red dots, and these guys are staying on the cutting edge of technology and making sure that guys out there in the field get some of the best stuff out there. Go check them out. The link is down below. They have a special promo for dangerous questions, and like I said, they're setting the standard. Go check them out. Next question. Can you talk about dynamic entry versus deliberate entry and footwork? No. Okay, next question. No, I'm just kidding. All right, so the biggest thing about this, and again, always respecting, you know, where I came from, let's just talk about the context real quick. I'll break it down for you, at least in the contrast, so you understand. Is my family safe or are they not safe? Am I in an environment where there's really no harm to me? There's really no immediate threat. Maybe the threat pops up over here. I'm at a gas station and somebody else is being robbed. Well, I don't have an immediate threat. They're clearly the focus. What do I need to do in this scenario? What about in our home? If my family's not safe, okay, say I hear one of my children yelling from the other room and I'm behind the power curve. I was in a deep sleep, window got broken into, family's already screaming. I didn't even get a chance to grab my gun yet. Maybe I do, maybe I don't, depending on the context. But I am going to be arming myself to the best of my ability to get there, depending on what I feel I need to do. And I'm gonna be like a lightning bolt to get to the problem, within reason, right? But if I own the element of surprise, and my family's safe and they're all behind me sitting in the bed with me, I don't have to rush out there and I don't have to go rush to my own death. If I hear somebody break in my house, I can be like, oh, okay, cool. Just do, hey babe, just start calling 911 for me, please. I'm just gonna, press check here and get the cameras up. All right, what's going on? Oh, he's in the living room. Okay, cool. All right, you stay here, start arming yourself with that gun as soon as you got 911 on the phone. And hey, my oldest son, get him to watch the back door. I want to position you there. And if you guys hear me say I need you, then do X, Y, Z. Okay, where are the dogs? Well, I'm calm and I'm collected and I'm cool-headed with thinking about what to do next. You know, there's a big difference between my family being safe and not safe. All that changes when somebody's at risk and I feel like somebody could die or lose their life immediately. So, you know, now I'm gonna go out in the room and they're safe and just be like, okay, you know, I'm gonna take my time and do my thing. Or are they being threatened and they need my help immediately? I'm just gonna throw that contrast out there. That's all I'll say about that. I think it's at least good to know. And, you know, some people in this state, you know, they talk a lot about the clearance, and there's a lot of controversy out there really about how to clear and when. But I think that the most effective thing for somebody that's not well trained is to take what I said to heart about realizing the risks to yourself and about the speed and violence that I'm adding to that footwork and that dynamic movement. You know, it's real close to home as far as what tactics are, you know, and how I teach home defense and what it looks like to be on target. There's a lot of the principles that stay the same. And I realize that whether I'm at 7-Eleven, I'm in Afghanistan, or I'm in my own home, there's a lot of things that I'm going to do very similarly. And that's what I've always taught when people come to me for home defense questions. So anyway, all right, moving on.
There were some dark moments. Holy shit.
We ought to probably have dinner sometime.
They were ghosts.
Okay, this guy's serious.
I mean, it's unheard of, right? Yeah. Tens of thousands of children digging cobalt out of the ground. just sensed that it was out
It's
there.
like they've been hit by a nuclear bomb.
We're not framing history correctly.
I want adaptability and versatility.
Don't draft Wolf on your fantasy team. He's not going to get the ball this year.
This is going to matter one day.
This is how I pulled myself out.
That's when my eyes were opened.
This is a whole new wildlife enemy, man. This is crazy. Who are these guys?
Us in our own country don't even have the same gratitude towards it.
And he does the right thing because he closes the distance.
We're all programmed in this world to push ourselves even farther.
I don't have to make something important, but what I have to try to do is make something you'll never forget.
All right, red dots. How have you trained from iron sights to finding the red dot? I've talked about this quite a bit in the last couple of episodes. And again, you talk about methodology here and techniques, is that the one thing I love about the red dot is it does expose your weaknesses in the sense of, especially a pistol, if you're not being consistent, it will dial you right in. I have still to this day not completely taken on a red dot when it comes to concealed carry. Iron sights are tried and true. They are anchored to my gun. They are dynamic and they are also combative. And what I mean by that is they will take a beating and still be there to be utilized. I think that if I'm adding bulk just to have a red dot that could essentially fail or break down or die, or the battery could get wet, or whatever the case may be, I just feel like for me, the go-to is always going to be iron sights, because it just simplifies what I'm trying to do. But that doesn't take away from the guy that's going to dedicate hours and hours and hours at making the red dot just as efficient as the iron sights could be. And if that's you, and that's a lot to me like guys that train with a blade, they say, hey, I'm using my dominant hand, right, to fight, to manipulate, to do all my templates. What about carrying on the lead side? Do you mind if I do that? And I say, sure, you can carry on the lead side if you've got the time and the ability to train on the lead side and make it as proficient as your dominant side, because there's always going to be a risk and gain and that time and value that you put in. So this is just one of those things. If you have the time and the value to dedicate towards red dot, awesome, more power to you, do it. You can get really, really accurate with a red dot, I think, further out, because you're reducing the variables and the sight radius with everything that you're doing. So there are pros and cons. From an everyday carry, specifically my opinion, Dom Raso's opinion on this, with being combative, it's going to be iron sights. That's what I'm going to choose. If you do a red dot, that's the sense of it, is like dedicate the time to it, and then you will be more efficient. That about does it for the questions on this. And now it's time to get into the video breakdowns. So the first one is a street robbery. Let's watch it together and we'll break it down. All right, so I believe this one's in Brazil. And we see this a lot, all the time. Guys are mobile, they're on some type of bike or moped, and they just snatch and grab. They're going in real quick, they got helmets on, their identity's covered, and this is awesome. Okay, I believe from just looking at this guy that he has at least a little bit of training, because of the way his demeanor is. Even from a martial arts perspective, his offset stance. I want to go back. So from a nonviolent posture position, okay, he's kind of assessing what's going on. They stop, they look it, immediately hands come out. Gives him whatever is in his hand. It's almost like they knew what was going on for whatever that transaction was earlier. Okay, now he's got his keys out, or whatever he's giving him. Maybe that's his wallet. There was a little bit of a retraction. So if you go back to that retraction, there was a little bit of a, whoop, you know, I put it out there to kind of bait you, and they tried to kind of pull them into him a little bit. Let's see if that works. Not too much. He didn't gain too much of that. He maybe gained about a half an inch of him pressing back in. That wasn't worth it, in my opinion, because it's almost like the gig's up. If you like retract, you're trying to, you know, fool them to pull them in. I think he already knows that he's going to go after the gun. But if you watch here, can we slow this down? Almost textbook getting that firearm away. He clears his body of the line of attack. He crashes into them to control that firearm. And I can't tell if he sweeped himself or not, but he had a really good push down of the gun. and was able to get his body offline and eventually gain control of that. So from a standpoint of happening very quick and them being in an unconventional position of being on a bike, I mean, I think this guy did awesome with crashing that gap. So he starts getting back on the bike, knowing that he wants to go, still presses him forward. He locks himself into a position so he loses mobility. As soon as his hand touches the gun, there's a little bit of a gap. There's probably about a half a foot, but when he decides to go, he stays on it. And I believe that's probably what saved his life. There was a real gun. You can clearly see he's taking shots here. But once he pushed the barrel offline, he stays on that barrel like a magnet all the way down to the fact that it's pointing to the ground. And then he turns, and it might not have been perfect the way I would teach it, but he made it work, kept control of the gun, and then turned it back on the guys that were still attacking him. I mean, look, this guy's still coming after him, you know? So I believe that what he's doing right now, he's still backing up, he's trying to evade, and the guy's still trying to attack. But I love the movements that he made when he decided to go. So again, there's a little bit to learn here, and the nonviolent posture was context, was textbook as well. But for the context given, I think he did a great job. He dropped what was in his hands. It's a great learning video. The only thing I wouldn't have done is probably retract. If anything, I would have probably started to inch up my body, not in an aggressive manner, but been like, you know, as soon as my keys came out or whatever those were, it's like, dude, you know, fine, here are my keys. And just step forward, trying to give him the keys, you know, recoiled and retracted. That way I could get closer. If that's what I'm choosing to do, I'm at least putting myself in better range to make that movement. Like, dude, no problem, man. Hey, whatever you want, here you go. And then I get a little bit closer, I hand off the whatever's in my hand, whatever they asked for, and then clear, control, crush. All right, next video. This one is labeled as a knife fight. All right, this guy's out in the street, he's got his back up against the car. Guy's wearing glasses, aggressive movement. Looks like he's, okay. So eventually this guy just started screaming at the top of his lungs. I like that he's using a reverse grip. I mean, that's good. These guys just kind of walk off nonchalantly. Now, so South Africa looks like they were trying to attack him for whatever reason. Maybe he had something they wanted, but the bad guys in this situation are clearly the ones that have multiple attackers outside of his vehicle. Now, I think he did a great job here. You know, however he armed himself, he's got that blade out, you know, doesn't look very sharp and he doesn't look very trained at all because he kept grabbing it by the blade. But the demeanor, the violence of action, you know, looking back and forth with the intensity. I mean, I think that's what switched and ultimately pushed them over the limit to say, okay, this guy's serious and he's probably going to use that thing. There was one point where he kind of scanned this way and scanned back to the door. And it was like that guy had that one single gap to push the door back in on him, or else he probably would have been able to get right in the car unencumbered, been able to lock the door and been clear. So in that scenario, that half beat where that guy was able to push his arms in the door, right here. I mean, that's what put him over the top too. You realize that I need to fight because now he's feeling a little bit of pain and now he's yelling at guys falling all over the place. If I go back here, this is why we train. This is why if I am in a fight for my life, if these guys are trying to take something, say one of my kids is in the car, you know, and then a blade finally does come out. It's like, okay, well, my blade's out. Now these guys are going to realize really quick that I'm going to use this thing if they're trying to attack me, because even a limb coming in, it's like, boom, get off me. You know, now you know that you're going to pay every time you put a hand in here or try to attack, you're going to pay for that until I'm able to break contact and mitigate what's going on around me. But I think ultimately this guy just stepped up his level of violence to a point where those guys were like, all right, we're probably going to get cut. We're probably going to get injured. It's not worth it. Let's break contact here. Whatever was in the vehicle wasn't worth it for those guys on that day. And I think that's probably what we can take away from this. So as you guys are in and around your vehicle or you're being attacked, I think your body language is important. I think eventually once you go and tip the scale, it's time to act and it's time to do everything you can. And I think he was all in. He's like, I got the blade out, I'm yelling, I'm screaming at the top of my lungs. This guy might not have much training, but the intent was there and the bad guys felt it. All right, those are the video breakdowns for this episode of Dangerous Questions, an Ironclad original. I pray that you guys are taking data away from this and that you're continuing to become an asset for yourself and your family. I love doing this. I love doing this for you guys. Please keep sending the questions in. Thank you for all this continued support. God bless you, and talk to you on the next one. Peace.